Hello everyone and welcome back to another Destiny 2 video. Today, we are talking about RoN. You're probably thinking, who's RoN? Well, RoN is not a person. It's a raid. It's Root of Nightmares. And we're reviewing it today. Today, of all days. Also, before we get started with the video, I just wanted to take a moment to have a moment of silence for Lance Reddick, our great, big, blue and beautiful commander Zavala. Also had a starring role in John Wick, and had a multitude of other roles that he was well known for, but he will always be known to me as Commander Zavala. And with that being said, let's have our moment of silence for him. Okay. If you'd like to pay homage to Zavala, there are a lot of Guardians right now going to the tower and just chilling near him to show and pay our respects to the great Zavala. Without further ado though, let's get into the review. So, Root of Nightmares is essentially add clear the raid. Boy oh boy am I a fan of ad density. So, I don't mind this. As you can and will see in some of this footage here, there's a lot of things to kill. And if you don't come prepared for that, this raid will demolish you, or at least the ads will. Now, I do think that you can get ad density or ad density itch from something like Battlegrounds, and to have a raid mixed in with that is great and all. I do think the mechanics are not that great. My reason for saying that is, in this first encounter here, there isn't really much for everyone to do. As you can see, I'm the one who's running the nodes here, and the rest of my teammates, we're actually doing a challenge here. You have to kill the Scions within 1 second of each other, which is actually probably the easiest challenge in this raid, at least from what I've seen so far. And it does take a little bit of coordination, but really this is the hardest way to do this encounter is with that. Otherwise you just kill the Scions on sight, and essentially everyone else except for me in this scenario is on ad clear. And it basically does feel like a catch crash almost, where you have one person doing the objective and everyone else is just killing things. And while I don't mind having encounters like that here and there, that is what most of this raid feels like. And I'm not saying that has to be like Last Wish or Spire of Stars level of mechanics, maybe somewhere in line with Deepstone Crypt or Vow, and it just feels like it lacks any time or any sort of team mechanic that requires you to work as a team. It's mostly just one or two people doing the node mechanic with light and or dark, and then someone like shooting Nezarec at the end. But again, it only requires like a max of 4 people, and that's only for one encounter. And even then, in the third encounter, people have 3-manned it, 2-manned it. Granted, I do think that Microcosm is the best encounter in this raid. Overall, Microcosm feels like the most fleshed out encounter. It feels a little bit like Caretaker, because you have 4 people involved, right? In Caretaker, you'd have 2 stunners, generally speaking, 2 runners getting the symbols inside the symbol room, and then 2 people on ad clear. And that feels nice because you can always rotate jobs and everything feels fresh. So say you don't want to run, you'd rather do ad clear, you can do that. Say you'd rather stun instead of doing ad clear, you want to actually do something, you can. And in this encounter you can kind of do that as well. You have 4 swappers who change out the planets on either side to make sure they're in the correct side, light and dark. and you just have 2 people on ad clear, so again, there's not too many people doing nothing, if that makes sense, and it feels a lot more like your team has to be involved. They have to know, or at least have somewhat of an idea as to what's going on. Whereas in every other encounter, really feels like you can have 1 or 2 people with the knowledge of the mechanics, and you can be fine. I think there's a happy balance between a raid like Root of Nightmares, which is very mechanic light, and raids like Spire of Stars, or Raid Layer anyways, and raids like Last Wish that have a lot more heavy mechanics that require almost everyone to get involved. I really am a fan of encounters where you have 4 or 5 people doing something, and, you know, the other 2 people are on ad clear or whatever. That doesn't mean that every encounter and every raid has to be that way, you know, and this is kind of how raids should be designed, at least in my opinion. Now again, this is all my opinion, so please take it with a grain of salt. But, you know, first encounter, 1 or 2 people know what needs to be done. It's not that mechanic heavy, like the door opening phase in any raid ever. Then as the raid goes on, you have more and more involved mechanics, and that kind of is how Root of Nightmares works, except you go from the first and second encounter, right? First encounter you only need 1 runner, second encounter you need 2, third encounter you need 4 people, and then you take a step back. Because, well, I guess you still need 4 people in Nezarec, right? You need 2 people making him angry at them, popping his shoulders to find out which pulse you need, and then 2 people running, 1 on light, 1 on dark. So I guess you still need 4 people. But Nezarec, again, just feels really, really easy. And that might be because he's not got that much health. It might be because the phase isn't that long. When you think about long boss phases, you think about bosses like Oryx, who it takes a long time to get to damage. Although that raid is very forgiving, like if you miss a bomb, you know, you're just gonna lose out on damage. You can always go back and make it up. So it's not the end of the world, but damage doesn't last that long. I think it's like 15-20 seconds maybe. However, you know, as we've gotten stronger and, you know, linears just tear up Oryx anyways, he kind of just falls over in 2 phases anyways. But having Nezarec do so from the bat on contest really does lessen the magnitude of that fight. It makes you feel like you can mess up on damage and still be somewhat okay. However, again, I think if we find a happy medium between Root of Nightmares and a raid like Last Wish or Spire, you can kind of please everyone. Have a few encounters that only require a couple people to do things, have a couple of encounters that require everyone to have some kind of job, even if it's a minor one, like being an operator in the nukes, or the third encounter on DSC, where you need to have at least 1 person scanning, 1 person operating, and 1 person suppressing at all times, with the possibility of any of those people losing their buff at any given time. So we'll see how that shakes out in the future. On to the lore. Oh my goodness, do I love the lore for this raid. Knowing that Savathun had killed Nezarec during the first collapse, and basically dabbed on his body, whisked away the veil from Nezarec's ship, and safely brought it to Neptune to keep the Traveler safe. Certainly gives Savathun more of anti-hero vibes as opposed to a straight-up villain, and I think we might see her as an ally somewhere in the future, but that remains to be seen. You know, and despite us, you know, only killing part of Nezarec this for the second time, because his head is the only part of his body that is actually him. So, yeah, everything else was created by the light and darkness. That's why he kind of looks like Rolk, is because it's not his actual body. Because if you remember, Osiris actually drank the remnants of Nezarec's body in the season of the Plunder to wake up from his coma. And that's essentially how he regained his consciousness, and it was from the power of Nezarec. I suppose we'll have to wait and see what the terraforming on the Witness's pyramid ship does. Will it have some kind of benefit for us in the future? Will it maybe give us some other quest somewhere down the line to perhaps figure out what the Veil is? Because that's still something that the campaign failed to answer, and anything post-campaign has failed to answer so far. And I'm curious to see whatever this object is here that you can see in the background of the Nezarec fight, kind of where he comes from, because it's pointed towards the Traveler, and presumably it's something that Nezarec was going to use to try and help the Witness, or I don't know. Maybe Bife or Mylan Gaming can figure out whatever it is at some point, or maybe through the next couple seasons or so we'll have some lore on it, but for now we wait. Not to mention that the third encounter in Microcosm not only is the most involved encounter in the entire raid, feels the most fluid, but it also has a lot of lore implications. If you remember, during some Artifact of Reflections, I think this one was Insight, Savathun gave us 2 truths and 2 lies. And we don't know if this particular one is true, but it seems so. The truths/lies are the following. Savathun is in control of Io, Titan, and Mercury. The Witness returned Mars from the Void. The Guardians will soon learn to move planets. And the last one, the Taken King will return. So we can assume that the Witness gave Mars back to us. For what reason, we don't know. But the ability to move planets, or to be able to learn to move planets, is something that we seem to do again in this encounter. So it makes sense that maybe this is a truth, and Savathun was in fact telling the truth in this case. Now, if the 2 truths are in fact that the Witness returned Mars from the Void, and that we will soon learn how to move planets, then from Insight at least, we have figured out the 2 truths. So that means the Taken King will not return, which canonically seems likely, and that Savathun is not in control of Io, Titan, and Mercury, because if she was, when she died, it most likely would have meant those planets would have been back in our control. So it'll be interesting to see which of these 3 are potentially true or untrue. I think we kind of can glean that the ability to learn how to move planets is certainly one of those, but who knows if we're actually doing it? I don't know. I'm going to count it for just the sake of this video. If it gets debunked, it gets debunked, whatever. But I think it's hard to deny the truth of this one, at least for now. Also, I think it's really cool throughout this fight how the light and darkness are essentially rejecting Nezarec. They don't want him to live anymore. That's what that beam from this weird-looking staff thingy hits him with, as you'll see right here. So as you see right there, it's the light and the dark, actually. You can kind of see both blue and orange hit Nezarec at the same time. They want him to die. These entities want Nezarec to be no more, because they just fear him and they don't like him because of his past deeds, I would assume. And maybe we'll figure out more throughout raid lore and whatnot once that's all been collected. But it certainly is and seems that the darkness and the light are rejecting Nezarec, and as wielders of both, the Guardians are the only ones who can properly dispose of him. And, well, we certainly do that. Overall, this raid aesthetically is one of the most pleasing raids ever. It's certainly, I think, better than Garden of Salvation, and the music makes it really good. I think the introduction of Nezarec throughout the Lightfall campaign and in certain post-campaign activities gave us a certain relationship with him that we've never had before. His terrorization of the Neomuni people also made everything feel a little bit more dire, I suppose, because some of them had already started killing each other because of what Nezarec was doing. The nightmares, the terror, all that stuff was driving them insane, quite similarly to how the scientists on the moon in the Anomaly Crucible map quite literally started killing each other. And of course, on the K1 installation, there was an artifact from Nezarec's pyramid ship, and that's presumably how Nezarec was able to terrorize them and to feed off their pain and terror as he does so well. However, in the end, this raid, it's just not challenging. I think once everyone learns the mechanics, or the very few mechanics throughout this raid, clears will be going faster than ever. And, you know, this raid group particularly that you're seeing the footage of, it was essentially me with 2 other people who had done it, and then 3 people who had never done the last few encounters. And it took us about 2 hours, which isn't bad, right? I think, if I remember correctly, that, you know, Vow might have been completed in a similar time, but that was after everyone had learned the mechanics. So, I do think it's nice to have a raid like RoN every now and then. It's not too mechanic heavy, it's not too difficult as far as damage checks go, and it is definitely more appeasing and appealing to newer players who maybe don't have what it takes to make it past damage checks like Caretaker. So, you know, it does fail on the challenge front. We'll give it an A+ for fun and whatnot, but overall this would definitely end up in like a C+ tier for me, just because it doesn't really give you the challenge itch that you're looking for. And will I play a lot of this raid? Absolutely. The weapons are awesome, the exotic is really cool, the armor looks sick, and overall it's really fun to play. However, will I be going out of my way to do this? Maybe to help friends here and there, because it's not difficult for me anyways. It might be difficult for some people. I have to say that because, again, not everyone is good at raids, and not everyone has been doing raids as long as me or some other people in the community. Bruh. Cut. And it's okay for, you know, your friends to like this raid, or maybe other people to like this raid, and for you to maybe not enjoy it as much as they do. Because that's just how Destiny goes with some content, so deal with it. It's fun, it's cool to look at, and I'll definitely be playing more. And I don't think this is a bad raid by any stretch at all. It's fun. I just think it's definitely not my favorite. So yeah, anyways, let me know what you guys think about RoN, and not Ron Burgundy, the raid. Let me know respectfully what your thoughts are below. Please be respectful to devs and people who like this raid, because, well, you know, just don't poop on people's parade. Subscribe if you haven't already, it helps me a lot. Like this vid if you enjoyed it, and as always, know that your viewership is plenty for me, and I'll see you guys in the next one.